Hello everyone, I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Team Trump arrives in Israel to finally bring peace to the Middle East. Allegations of torture complicate the tragic 2015 Duma arson case, and Israelis travel south to keep South Sudan afloat during a terrible drought. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. United States President Trump's Middle East peace envoy is full steam ahead, traveling all over the Middle East in hopes of restoring peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner is leading the team, and now, after today nearly being snubbed, Kushner's just met with Egyptian President al-Sisi as well as King Abdullah of Jordan. But today may be Kushner's biggest day of meetings. Right now he's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in hopes of rebooting talks that have been completely stalled for years. But already this is looking to be an uphill battle. The Palestinians are very skeptical of this American negotiation, citing the State Department's unwillingness to endorse a two-state solution, as well as ongoing turmoil within Trump's own White House. President Abbas himself has also said it would be pointless to negotiate with Israel amidst ongoing police investigations against Netanyahu in various corruption scandals, because it would be a shame to make progress on peace talks only for the Israeli leadership to abruptly change. It doesn't seem like there will be any threat of that happening anytime soon, though, since the latest polls suggest that Netanyahu's Likud party has actually gained in popularity despite the accusations, potentially bringing his total number of spots in the Knesset to a commanding 34 seats, higher than any other party. Still, United States officials are saying that Washington can't commit to a two-state solution for fear that it would bias one side of the negotiations over the other. This is especially frustrating for Palestinians who have been complaining since the beginning of America's lack of overall clarity on the matter. They're clearly less than inspired by Team Trump's latest push, especially after a leaked tape of Jared Kushner made headlines in which Kushner himself told his interns that there, quote, may be no solution to the Israeli-Palestinian peace after all. Let's hope he's wrong about that. So even with an American peace envoy in town, Palestinians don't seem too optimistic about securing an independent Palestinian state. But apparently, Palestinian Authority President Abbas has a Hail Mary plan if things get really dire. He may dissolve the Palestinian Authority government completely and revert power back to the PLO. Clearly, the Palestinians are frustrated with stagnated efforts to create a Palestinian state. With the international community divided on the matter and negotiations with Israel at a standstill, Abbas's government is also split with Hamas over leadership of a potential state. But if he were to dissolve the Palestinian Authority, it wouldn't mean the end of the Palestinian leadership. Control of the area would fall into the PLO's hands, which Abbas himself is the head of. Under such a move, Israel would potentially become solely responsible for providing fundamental public services, including security, education, and health, leaving the PLO to pursue statehood in international forums. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard reports of a potential dissolving of the PA. There were similar frustrations with the peace process after failed negotiations in 2011 and 2014, and Abbas had threatened to dissolve the PA when those talks stalled, something that obviously never happened. These latest reports are coming just as Trump's peace envoy, led by Jared Kushner, has landed to meet both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas. President Trump has said if Jared Kushner can't broker Middle East peace, then no one can. So we'll just have to wait and see if that's really the case. In what can only be described as a baffling exchange, Islamic State militants are today begging for mercy from Syrian pro-Assad and Hezbollah forces. After nearly a week of clashes and attempts to oust ISIS from the Qalamun region in the Syria-Lebanon border, ISIS is asking to be allowed to withdraw. Here to help us understand what's going on in the region is former head of Israeli Air Force Intelligence, Brigadier General Ram Shmueli. Thank you very much for returning to the show. Thank you for coming. So first of all, we've heard reports that Hezbollah is looking at agreeing to allowing ISIS to withdraw. Why would they do that? If they have ISIS on the run, wouldn't the idea ideally be to drive ISIS out and get rid of them from the area?
Not ISIS and not Hezbollah have rights to mercy. So it is between choosing the bad and the bad more than that. I think this is not the big question. The big question, what will be next? Yeah. We are now in a watershed situation in the Middle East that ISIS is going to be defeated. But all the opponents that make a coalition together, on one side the Americans and the Russians and the Iranian, are now facing the new ball game with a big vacuum inside. So whether the ISIS people will get mercy or not, I don't care. I care about the future.
So who's going to fill that vacuum once ISIS is gotten rid of, as you say?
There is one regional superpower, Iran, which had big plans on the region. They started with the war in Iraq, and actually now they control. This is like they control Iraq, and they control it by the Shia movement. Now they plan to do the same thing in Syria, even though the Alawi, that Assad is part of the Alawi, are minority, but they are part of the Shia movement, and they want to get inside Iran and to build inside Syria and to build a puppet regime. And this vacuum is going to be filled by the Iranian unless we should do something, unless the Russian will do something, unless the American will do something.
So that's kind of, brings up the question, what are these new borders going to be like? Is Syria going to really actually exist? Because here you're saying it's going to be basically a puppet regime of, Iran and likely Russia with, at the hands, on the right hand of Iran, possibly Turkey now it seems. So at what point does Israel and the United States and other world powers say enough is enough? What's the red line here?
The red line, Iran got a plan. They got a plan to get inside Syria, to build the infrastructure, to put a puppet regime, and to go and sit on the border with Israel. Like the same thing they have done in Lebanon for the last 20 years, when the Hezbollah is standing on the border with Israel. Now they want to build the same thing in the Golan Heights. And this is something that Israel cannot tolerate. We have to put some borders and red lines, and this is why Netanyahu went to Putin to tell him those things. And the things are three red lines that I believe Netanyahu should say to Putin, even though he met already. Mm-hmm. First one, no Iranian soldiers on the border, on Golan Heights. No Iranian. Secondly, no military infrastructure. And we see already that the Iranians are building military infrastructure. Yeah. And third, it's very, very important that the Iranian will not make a kind of a puppet regime that they will control this country. So the Russian will control the northern part of Syria because they need the ports, and the Iranians are going to get inside the country. And Assad owes his life to the Iranian. So he's not going to confront them. The only one that is going to do it is Israel.
I'm not sure Assad would have the power to fight them after this long drawn-out war.
Absolutely. And the fourth thing that I forgot is the strategic weapon. Any kind of strategic weapon. And the Iranians are trying to smuggle a strategic weapon to Lebanon and now to Syria. This is 4 red lines that we have to draw on the line. And to tell you the truth, no the American, no the Russians, nobody is going to do the work for us. But we have to push very hard forward on the Putin regime and on the Americans that we can't afford ourselves Iranian forces on the Golan Heights on our border.
All right, well, I hope Prime Minister Netanyahu has your resolve and your wisdom. Thank you very much, Brigadier General Ram Shmueli.
You're welcome.
Now, the Arab world has been fiercely boycotting the nation of Qatar since June, demanding that Qatar cease ties with Iran. But now it looks like Qatar is prepared to oppose this intense regional pressure and is actually trying to completely restore Qatar-Iranian relations back to full health. Qatar is sending a clear message to the Gulf states that it plans to resist the blockade placed against its land, air, and sea routes.
طبعا الدول الأربع هي تتمنى أن تتحرك السلطات القطرية في اتخاذ الخطوات القانونية واتخاذ أيضا الأمور العملية لملاحقة طبعا الأفراد والكيانات المقيمة على قطر ومتابعتها لوقف تمويل الأنشطة الإرهابية الواردة طبعا في القائمتين السابقة والقائمة الأخيرة. طبعا هذا الأمر يؤكد مصداقية وجدية قطر. هذا ما تتمناه الدول الأربع، لكن قطر لم تتخذ أي تحرك بهذا الخصوص.
Diplomatic relations were downsized with Iran last year, limiting Qatar-Iranian cooperations down to a mostly oil ties. Regionally, Qatar and Iran share a large offshore reserve of natural gas, which requires clear lines of communication from both sides in order to work. After the crisis began in June with the Gulf states' blockade of Qatar, ties with Iran slowly began to warm up, practically in spite of the Arab nations' demands for them to cease. But now Qatar is clearly prepared to fly in the face of any such demands, announcing that full diplomatic ties will be restored, along with the reopening of its embassy in Iran's capital. There's a delicate balance at play here, with overlapping religious and political agendas, too. Saudi Arabia, for example, is at the head of the boycott, but just last week the Saudi government opened its border with Qatar to allow religious pilgrims to peacefully make their yearly Hajj pilgrimage. But by fully embracing relations with Iran, Qatar now seems to be deliberately stirring the pot, which could mean the crisis is only just unraveling. 2 years ago, we saw the horrific arson of a Palestinian home in Duma, which resulted in the tragic death of 3 members of the Dawabsha family, including their 18-month-old baby. Israeli police arrested 2 Jewish suspects based on a confession, but now it turns out that that confession was forced through torture. News broke last year that a 17-year-old suspect named A was tortured by police after the Attorney General at the time personally granted permission to use physical force in the interrogations. A transcript of the events leaked to the press revealing that the suspect confessed to the crime, but only after intense torture. Later, for A at least, police then chose not to indict him. The lack of action against A, however, indicated to many that the police were aware their measures were giving them false confessions. Similar torture methods were used to get confessions from 2 other suspects who are now accused of planning and carrying out the horrific arson of the Dawabsha family house. But now the Israeli courts are faced with a difficult decision of whether they can accept confessions made under situations of duress, or worse, or whether they have to throw them out altogether. To complicate the issue further, there have been big question marks all over this case for years, which ignited a domino effect of revenge terror attacks between Israelis and Palestinians ever since. In fact, suspicions arose early on that the Dawabsha murderers may not have had anything to do with the alleged Jewish terror, but might have actually been a cover-up for a local feud between rivaling Palestinian families. This is a very messy case with both Palestinian and Israeli eyes glued to the evidence, everyone awaiting to see what the courts will finally decide. Looks like the blowback from Trump's controversial statements about both sides of the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, just keep coming. A coalition of American rabbis have just canceled their annual high holidays phone call with the White House, citing Trump's reaction to anti-Semitism as lacking in moral leadership. It's been nearly 2 weeks since the tragic events of Charlottesville, Virginia, which saw the largest gathering of white supremacists and Nazi flags on United States soil in decades, and the murder of the 32-year-old Heather Heyer by a Nazi sympathizer. President Trump first made the controversial statement that there had been violence on both sides responsible for the day's chaos, and later doubled down on his claim, saying there were very fine people among the group of right-wing protesters, which included neo-Nazis and KKK members. Now the Jewish American leaders are taking a stand against Trump's remarks by canceling the yearly high holiday phone call, which has been a staple of White House Jewish relations for years with former administrations. The leaders have called out Trump, saying the president has, quote, given succor to those who advocate anti-Semitism, racism, and xenophobia, end quote. Israel is a first responder to environmental and humanitarian crises all over the world. And now, in the midst of an intense drought, the Jewish state has just delivered 6 tons of much-needed food to the war-torn nation of South Sudan. Civil war erupted in South Sudan a few years ago following years of bloody unrest, which tore the region apart and scattered millions of Sudanese people all over the world. In coordination with Israel's Ministry for International Development, various NGOs, and Israel's embassy in Juba, Israel has successfully just brought a huge aid package to South Sudan at a time when the country needs it the most. Israel delivered the 6 tons of food directly to South Sudanese villages, which were quickly dispersed among the local residents by government officials. Health conditions have been crumbling in the area following the widespread drought, too, leaving millions open to famine and disease. This is certainly a sign that this corner of the world is too often overlooked by most of the rest of the world. Hopefully, at least, maybe Israel can lead the charge in rallying for help. Oh, sweet serenity now, Seinfeld is coming to Netflix. The beloved Jewish comedian just landed a major deal with the streaming giant, bringing not 1 but 2 new specials to Netflix, along with his acclaimed web series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Netflix has just announced that Jerry Seinfeld's latest special, Jerry Before Seinfeld, will be hitting home theaters on September 19th, right in time for Rosh Hashanah. But before you bust out your Festivus poll, there's more. Seinfeld's deal also includes exclusive Netflix rights to a second original special, along with 24 new episodes of his Emmy-nominated web series, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Now, am I crazy or am I so sane that I just blew your mind? That means Fusilli Jerry is joining other comedians like Louis C.K., Chris Rock, and Dave Chappelle, who have made amazing specials just for the streaming giant. It took a little while for Netflix to finally make it over here to Israel. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but yada yada yada, at least we're finally getting some new Seinfeld. Giddy up. As if getting a surgery wasn't hard or stressful or dangerous enough, add to that the risk of infection, long regeneration times, and the expense and pain of switching out bandages. Well, one Israeli startup is hopefully going to put an end to all of those complications, and here to explain how is CEO and co-founder of Nurami, Dr. Amir Bahar. Thank you very much for coming, Doctor.
You're welcome.
All right, now my first question for you is, what exactly does Nurami do?
So Nurami is a startup company that started just 3 years ago, and we have an innovative nanofiber and nanotechnology which creates bandages that goes into our bodies after surgeries. And
so it degrades and becomes part of the
Exactly,
tissue.
yeah. One of the problems today is that bandages in the body do not degrade, and our bandage degrades after about 6 months.
What's the biggest issue of a bandage that does not degrade, and the benefits of one that does degrade?
Yeah, well, eventually there are infections and other kind of complications for these kind of patients, and this is a very big problem today.
So in what circumstances, under what diseases, ailments, in what complications do you use this bandage?
Yeah, so our bandage right now is focused on brain surgeries.
Okay.
Neurosurgery.
So like exposed cranium.
Yeah, so after a surgery, after a brain surgery, basically our brain is exposed.
Right.
And it's obviously very dangerous because the fluids that surrounds the brain might go out.
Yeah, it doesn't sound so bad.
And you don't want to have this. And the major problem is that bacteria can go in. And what we do is basically we create a special bandage that has 100% sealing abilities, and it is made of nanofibers, and it's very elastic, very strong, and it protects the brain during these 3 to 4 months until a new tissue grows up and the wound was healed.
So, and this is proprietary, patent pending and everything?
Obviously, yeah. We have a patent in China, USA, which is our largest market.
So how did you come up with this? Like, what was the inspiration behind this innovation?
Well, me and my partner, co-founder Noran Nasser, both of us were working at the Technion in Haifa, which is the Israeli MIT, and we became aware of this technology, of this nanotechnology. And we incidentally spoke with a neurosurgeon and asked him, what kind of problems do you have? And he said, look, I have a problem of leakage from the brain after the surgery. After the surgery ends, and patients sometimes have to stay in the hospital and have a redo surgery. Meaning that a patient comes to
fix something that was already done?
A patient comes for one surgery and then he has to go through another surgery just because of this.
Complications from the first one. So, I mean, does that happen a lot where medical innovation is directly caused by some doctor going to an innovator and saying, hey, I got a problem with a leaky brain?
Yeah, I think that very often medical doctors are not aware of the problems they have because they are so used to doing the same thing over and over again. So they think this is what we need to do. And even if they have a problem, they are really not aware of this. So sometimes entrepreneur must go, you have to go to a medical doctor and question him until you find the real problem.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Supply and demand. So you go to the guy and you say, "What do you demand?" And I'll supply it.
Yeah.
So my final question, because we've only got a little bit of time left, but where and when will this product be available? I think you said it already is.
No, well, we are now going into what we call the clinical trials or human trials by the end of this year in a few months. And we're trying to raise more money. The company is now trying to go into the second round of fundraising. We raised so far $2 million.
Wow! Congratulations!
That's
amazing.
Yeah, we were one of our major investors is NGT VC, which is a small venture capital fund in Nazareth, in the north of the country. This is also something unique. Yeah. I think it's not most of the venture capital funds are here in Tel Aviv.
Amazing.
So we were fortunate to be supported by them. We're looking now for more money in order to have a larger clinical trial
and save.
So that in 2 years we will be able to sell our product in the market.
All right. Well, I don't think you're going to have any problem with that. Not with this kind of product. Thank you very much for coming in, Dr. Amir Bahar. All right, and now we turn to our weekly Top 5 segment. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh is here to tell us the top 5 water-related nature reserves in Israel.
Yes, well, it's no secret the Holy Land has some of the hottest summers. With unexpected heat waves and intense humidity, it's pretty hard to escape. So here are the top 5 water nature reserves to visit. At number 1, Gan HaShlosha, or the Garden of the Three, is located near Mount Gilboa and was once named one of the best natural parks in the world by Time magazine. The Sachne Thermal Springs, whose water remains at 82 degrees Fahrenheit all year round, as well as the Archaeological Museum, the Greek, Egyptian, and Persian artifacts, and the Gangahu Australian Park with kangaroos, koalas, and wallabies. Yeah, I wouldn't want to miss out on that one. At number 2, located in the Upper Galilee at the base of Mount Helmon, awaits you the Banyas Nature Reserve. 3.5 kilometer springs leads you to the largest waterfall in Israel, where natural beauty and tons of history surrounds you. Explore the ruins of the Roman temple and the Banyas Cave, and you've got yourself a true adventure. At number 3, the hexagonal pool is located in the central part of the Golan Heights in the Meshushim Reserve, named after the 6-sided basalt columns that form the wall as a result of the cooling of molten lava. Definitely worth going in for a dip. Number 4, we have migrating birds on their annual trip from Europe to Africa and back, and they come to rest and refuel at the Hula Valley Nature Reserve. Prior to the establishment of the State of Israel, pioneers drained most of the 15,000 acres in order to create farmland, ultimately leaving 791 acres as Israel's first nature reserve. Come visit more than 200 migrating species, as well as rare aquatic plants and water buffaloes. You won't be disappointed. Last but not least, the Sea of Galilee, also known as the Kinneret, is the freshwater lake whose main source is the Jordan River. Many tourists come for historical or religious reasons, as well as hiking trails surrounding the lake for both families and experienced hikers. Bring your hiking shoes and swimsuit to get the full experience. Stay tuned for our next High 5. Back to you.
Thank you, Manuel. Now, get ready for... I'm sorry. Get ready for... Sorry. They're everywhere. Well, I'm sorry. As I was saying, get ready for the worst news you're going to hear all day. Israeli scientists are saying that global warming is giving cockroaches superpowers. Now brace yourselves, because we're about to cut to some videos of the grossest, most disgustingest creatures to scuttle across the land since forever.
As if this wasn't the last thing the world needed, an Israeli team has just been studying the effects of global warming at the height of a record-high summer here in the Holy Land, and they found something very disturbing, that the hotter it gets, the more hyperactive it makes all the cockroaches. The father in our new nightmares is named Professor Yoav Yair, and he's been leading the research from Israel's Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Apparently at colder temperatures, let's say 50 or 55 degrees, roaches tend to be pretty slow and lethargic. But once it hits the high 70s, they start to run. And how about when you break hundreds of degrees? Well, then the little unholy demons start to fly. A few years ago, residents in Israel were fighting for apartments above the first or second story, but now pest exterminators have been marching as high as the 4th or even 5th floor. And guess what? According to the professor, we should expect this phenomenon to get worse well into the coming decades. So there you have it. It won't be North Korea, it won't be Iran. I think it's the roaches that will finally be the end of us all. Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
So if you've heard our last story about superpowered cockroaches, you might have thought we were done talking about the world's most disgusting critter, but you'd be wrong, because our Hebrew word of the day today is juk, which means cockroach. Now, as you've probably heard, jukim, or cockroaches, are everywhere, even on the 3rd and 4th floor. But if you were living somewhere where the juk was on the menu, then maybe it wouldn't have been such a problem. But alas, jukim aren't on the menu at all. They're not even kosher. So basically, the betrayal by culture and rising global temperatures have literally given wings to my nightmares. Nightmares that plague me every waking moment. The possibility of a world consumed by jukim. Even the word juk makes me feel gross.
The weather is brought to you by international singer-songwriter Sabina. Make sure to check out her latest album, Purple Ribbons, and get updated for upcoming concerts.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. The weekend is here, and it's come with sunny skies and a slight rise in temperatures. The low tonight should be around 77 or 25 degrees Celsius. The weekend high will hover around 90 or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.61 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for watching.